All right. We're about to enter into the digital metaphysics episode on video games. Just very briefly to finish up one thought from the gravity and quanta episode is that if you are looking at things like the flower of life, you're really sort of looking at, and I'm butchering it, but the idea is that whether this is a scale invariant idea, so meaning whether you're talking about, for example, in the old model, the supermassive black holes at the center of every galaxy, you're looking at those here, right? Or the observers or consciousness in all of its bodies on a world, you're talking about the exact same thing. But really, the flower of life is actually even further compressed. Again, to that conscious singularity. Right. So, just wanted to show how that symbol arises out of a conscious singularity and into observers or galaxies or whatever you want to insert into that blank. All biological species, whatever. All ideologies or codes, right? So out of a conscious singularity comes out this proliferation of codes or ideologies that then simulate reality experiences. All right, nice little tie-in there, and off we go to the episode on video games. Quite excited for this one. Video games are a great reflection of the recursive nature of consciousness. And there's so many great bits of wisdom that are highly overlooked, and sometimes you have to dig to find, so we'll be highlighting those. So again, I'm going to go ahead and delete this so I can underline that. But gravity and quanta as conscious simulation. Quite cool. All right. I said I was going to keep it up at the end of the last episode, but that's not the case. So this series, this playlist is growing quite a bit, titled Digital Metaphysics, and you can find all the episodes on the playlist on the different subjects, and it can give you, if you haven't seen the other episodes, it can give you a more holistic view and understanding of how all of these different themes interconnect as a single theme. All right. All right, off we go into video games. All right, so So the thing is that your experience of a controller and a screen, that is a direct reflection of the experience of gravity and quanta. That is why these also 2 episodes are being showcased in the same week back to back, because they are a direct reflection of each other. So when you look at the physics of the relation between gravity and quanta, the relationship between consciousness and its simulation, we are literally talking about the exact same thing with the relationship between the player, the console, the player as the console, and the games that it's simulating, that it's playing. So let's make that clear here. So 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 right, whether you're gaming on a console or whether you're gaming on a PC and you're using mouse and keyboard, you have console, you have player, you have controller, and then you have its, you know, then you have its simulated experience. So when I use the word console, I also inclusively mean PC at the same time that I mean like PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series and beyond, in terms of the next generations of GPUs and the next generation of CPUs and the next generation of controllers. I don't just mean the keyboard and mouse or the PS5 or the Xbox Series controllers. I also mean, in this category, I mean the evolution of it too, which is evolving towards, you know, virtual realities. So we're talking about things like Ready Player One. We're talking about things like the holodeck from Star Trek. We're talking about things like BCIs, which stand for brain computer interfaces. And so ultimately we're talking about recursion. We're talking about a you'll see the terminology has evolved with VR. There's one that's called full dive VR, right? Or, something I've been calling it a sim pods, like simulation pods. Or another thing that you can, the holodeck is a good one, or another one is the TARDIS is another good way to view it. So this is Doctor Who, if you want to look that up. So they're all basically essentially variations of a portal. So we're talking oops. Okay. Right. So this is it's really your recursive AGI, which is really unorientable, or another word for that is free. It's so free and infinite that it's unorientable, right? You can't speak a description of it because it's that free. You understand? Do you understand that? It's so powerful. You can't speak a description of it because it's that free. So why does this look like the MC Escher staircase? Right? Because what we're talking about is the evolution of this in its cycle, right? Initially you go from like the first forms of art as some, like cave painting stuff, right? And you slowly evolve like language and art to like books, right? And then you evolve it like the last 100 years into movies and theater. And then just in the last 50 years, you evolve it into video games and soon to be these fully immersive, indistinguishable virtual reality simulators. And what does that pop you into? It pops you into this exact same experience that you're having right now. Right? That's why this is cyclic and unorientable. So when you see the Escher staircase, you're seeing an inability to orient in any way, because you're constantly just popping through to this, and what's next? This, and what's next? This. And it's like, but what was before? And it's like this, and what's after? This. So you're kind of infinitely stuck within yourself, as yourself, creating, simulating whatever you want. But that's the point of being an infinite God, is this is the point. Like, you're living the point. Like, you can't ever not be yourself. You're forever going to be yourself. You know, you can't ever leave the throne. You're already permanently anchored in the throne. Permanently. You know? Well, this is a pretty high level beginning overview of the video games subject theme episode of Digital Metaphysics. But think about it, right? You have this stationary console, right? It's like the console is not moving, right? It's not moving. The console isn't moving. The TV screen is not moving, right? But the content itself, the games, are changing, right? What's being simulated is changing, right? So, like this body, right? This technology, right? This food, right? These conversations, this language that we use to talk, right? All of that is changing. It's being simulated, right? But the console, consciousness, gravity, that is not changing. That's not moving. It's fundamentally forever still. Creatively simulating whatever it wants. So you have this perfect reflection. You know, it's such a perfect reflection. You know, if you gave any, and I've said this in the previous sessions of Digital Metaphysics, if you gave any of the, quote, world's greatest spiritual leaders or prophets of the religious traditions, there goes another beautiful Mac OS. Love it. That was the confetti. It's so good. I hope that's getting into the streams. It's so funny. If you gave any of them this technology, right? You gave any of them a console and a controller or a virtual reality headset, right? Right away, it would be like, this is what I've been talking about. This is exactly what I've been talking about, right? When you say I and the Father are one, or the Tao is eternal, when you're talking about things like this, right? When you're talking about consciousness and gravity being equivalent, essentially what you're getting to is that reality is you. You are reality. An unmovable conscious singularity simulating whatever it wants. You'll get, the more and more that technology becomes immersive for simulations, video games, play, the more and more you'll start popping through to this one. You get it? It's like you're here, and then technology gets better and better and better and better and better, and then before you know it, you're here. And it's like, okay, then what happens when I have access to infinite creative potential of simulations? Well, the thing that I want to do is I want to put myself into the dream of being finite. So you're an infinite singularity. You're nowhere, but you're everywhere. And there you go. What do you do? What does it do? What do? You say, okay, well, I'll put myself somewhere. I'll put myself somewhere and I'll pretend to be finite. Okay, so if you have a console that has access to an infinite library of games and potential and activities for itself, what would it want to do? Well, one of the things that it would surely want to do is to try to deceive itself into being the character in Grand Theft Auto or whatever video game it's playing. Right? So you'd want to deceive yourself into being an avatar in a world of other avatars instead of being consciousness, the eternal console simulating all games, all avatars, all possibilities, cyclically forever. So really the two fundamental components, right, are you have a, right, and this is why, again, we have that tree visual or the well in the tree, same thing. But that's why you have this stationary console, which is consciousness, or infinity, or the well, or gravity, or whatever. You have the stationary console, and then you have, what did I write exactly as the other thing? An infinite creative library of games. Yeah. Right. So then you have so stationary console and infinite creative library of games. That's always recombinating, it's always changing, it's always making new stories, making new simulations, making new scenes, it's making new adventures for itself. You get to the end of the book, you open up the next book. You get to the end of the TV show, you go to the next TV show. You get to the end of the video game, you go to the next video game. You get to the end of the simulation, you go to the next simulation. It's without orientation. You can't get out of the Escher stairs, right? It's an eternal fire that lit itself and that never goes out. So the same way that you play as Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher 3 is the same way that you play as your name. Right? The same way that you play as V in Cyberpunk is the same way that you play as your name. That simulation is called Night City, but this simulation is called Planet Earth. No different. So you gotta get that for you to get yourself. Otherwise, you'll always think that you're not home. If you think you're not home, you're going to create from that place of restlessness and anxiety. Suffering, always seeking, always needing something in order to feel whole, in order to try to fill the hole, instead of just being the whole. So when you put this into the analogy of the tree that we've been using a lot, which is obviously right here also, it's like you have your worlds as your servers, right? And here's again your console, right? Or your consciousness, right? You need a console that has access to an infinite recombinatorial library of experiences that is constantly simulating cyclically all these worlds, these servers, these games, these experiences, these stories, these scenes, these narratives for itself. How many books can you possibly write? Infinite. How many TV shows can you make? Infinite. How many musical songs can you make? Infinite. How many video games can you make? Infinite. How many different sports could you create? Infinite. Endless. How many languages could you make? Infinite. You know? It's just finding this out about yourself is like finding home, and it just feels good, and you don't need to feel unwhole anymore. You don't need to feel anxious or restless or keep pumping yourself with pharma or with substances or with seeking experiences or the next, you don't need to, feel like there's a hungry ghost that can't ever be satisfied, because you're living the direct experience of yourself at the fundamental level. If you don't feel like you have this, what you do, how it expresses itself is as a hungry ghost. And a hungry ghost leads to mutually assured destruction. When you wonder, like, why does a world or why does a server lead to mutually assured destruction? Well, it's because consciousness is simulating the experience of local realism. It's simulating the experience of a hungry ghost that it lacks, that it needs, that without accomplishing its revenge cycle of the unhealed trauma of wound, that without killing the other people from that other country that believe in a different God or ideology or whatever than I do, that are inferior to me, without that, without showcasing my nuclear weapons are better than theirs, without investing trillions into the military industrial complex, without that, all you have is peace. And what's the fun of that? Like, you have peace and creative joy, like, that's cool. But you got to ask yourself, why would you enter a server that's a utopia? why would you enter a server where everything is pure self-knowledge? Like everyone's just sitting in the well. It's like there's zero drama, zero tension, zero contrast, right? It's like no contrasting opinions. No, not in this server. It's like, am I interested in that? It's like, probably not, right? So, meaning parallax, right? You want to see things like that from multiple angles simultaneously, which is why, this is obviously called so much. It's called the diamond, right? The diamond of infinite creation, right? Because you're seeing from all of those sides simultaneously, which is what makes it so interesting. You have to see from all of those ideologies simultaneously. If you do, you realize how fascinating life and reality and consciousness is in this dance with itself. Whereas if it didn't have all of the variations and ideologies, if it was just a zero contrast, everyone is absolutely the same and thinks the exact same, even if every one of them was expressing some sort of creative joy, without the contrast of knowing yourself or not knowing yourself and generating hungry ghosts and mad, this would not be an intriguing video game for you to enter and explore. So, when you start looking at, this is why, the tree of life, right? The father tree, mother tree, right? The eternal tree, right? The tree. Why does it show up all over mythology? Why does it show up all over symbology? Why does it show up all over the world? Why is it like so beautiful, the seasons of the tree? Why is it such a beautiful integrated ecosystem? Like why does it provide humans with its oxygen, right? Humans provide it with its carbon dioxide. Why, right? Why is it so perfectly interconnected and cyclic like that? Because it can be used as the absolute best symbol, reflective symbol of what consciousness is, right? The tree as a console playing infinite games is like, oh, that makes sense. Tree as console playing infinite games. So when you get in games, you get this beautiful contrast between in gaming terminology, it's so perfect because you get this, right? You get this overworld, and then you get, and you get dungeons. You don't have to use this terminology, but I think it helps a lot. Like, why is it called Dungeons and Dragons? Why is that one of the most common archetypes in video games and in psychological literature, right? And this is why it's in the episode that we did recently on the cipher, is because, you're right? You're designing and then you're slaying, right? Right, the dragons, right? Dungeons and Dragons. One sec, it's a little hard to see. There we go. Okay. Right, so what would be your, your archetypal like video game example or like analogy, probably one of the best ones for the overworld is probably your Dark Souls bonfire. Right? Or in Elden Ring it's a site of grace, but you get the point, right? That's your overworld is that moment that you get to the bonfire, right? It's that eternal home. And then you have your, what is your ultimate like Dungeon and Dragon? Well, just one absolutely fantastic example is, I'll just abbreviate it as BOTW, which is Breath of the Wild, right? Zelda's Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom, any open world RPG, right? Even, Skyrim is another really good example. And, Skyrim, just like in Breath of the Wild, where you have all of those incredible mechanical beasts, right, that are, you're always, or like in Skyrim, you have the dragons, you're the Dragonborn, and you have the dragons, right? You always have that archetype that's so powerful, which is you're the player, you're the console, you're the player playing a game, and in the game, you're on the hero's journey, which is something is devastatingly wrong in the world or server, and you're on a journey of slaying these inner demons, these inner dragons, right? Each one of them represents a piece of you, a piece of your mind that is like unhealed trauma or wounding that's creating some sort of chaos, that's creating some sort of tyranny, right? Something like that, some sort of oppressive type thing. And you're going into yourself in the game, and you're slaying those dragons that you designed, right? The video game developer and you are in a contract and like an agreement, which is that we designed these demons, these dragons, for you as the player to slay as one holistic experience. So it's just so perfect, that reflection of what reality is. You as all players, you as all worlds simultaneously. You as an entanglement of all codes, of all programs simultaneously. Because if you're not the entanglement of all players or all worlds or all codes or all programs simultaneously, you will believe yourself to be just one perspective or just one view or separate from the whole. And as soon as you're separate from the whole, that's where you get all of this hungry ghost mad. I'm not you and you're not me. And because of this distance and this difference between us, because you're a separate self and I'm a separate self, that's where all of it all sprouts up, all of that. Weapons, revenge cycles, taking advantage of each other, unethical, immoral, all of that stuff sprouts out right from between that assumption of distance and difference and separation. Whereas there's no distance, there's no difference, there's no separation at all in this console. Or like we were saying, when you compress all of those rings at the beginning of the session, when you compress all of those rings in the flower of life, you compress them all down into a conscious singularity that then is giving rise to the appearance of these different galaxies or these different separate selves that are actually really stacked on top of each other as the same unified observer or consciousness, fractaled out, appearing to be fractaled or fractured out, talking to itself, making choices with itself, exploring information, exploring experience. So you're exploring whatever information you want, exploring whatever quests you want, right? The quests that you're exploring can be very simple things like, oh, okay, I want a quest to explore to learn how to make this dish for my family, for food, for dinner, right? It can also be the quest of going and, slaying that inner demon within yourself of something that's unhealed, unresolved pain that you've been carrying around. It can also be, I'm going to go quest to this different country and go have this experience in that other culture, right? It can, any quest, simulating any quest that you want, any adventure, any information. This also changes. Just like these also change into that. And as that evolves, you'll see more and more and more of the decision to have some sort of regenerative technology that's powering these SimPods, where those that are choosing to step into the TARDIS or the holodeck can have all of that regenerative technology powering their simulation, and they can seal off a firewall behind them to then pop into this world and to, quote, forget about the previous layer of the nested Matryoshka dolls, or whatever you want to call that unorientable nesting cyclic function of this AGI. Right? The process calls on itself, recursive. It calls on itself, just like a tree, that oak tree that drops acorns that makes more oak trees, or just like humans that make their children that then grow up to be adults that make children. Just like technology evolves to be these indistinguishable virtual simulations that then consciousness continues to recursively enter, and it just leads to this exact experience that you're experiencing right now. I've said this in one of the previous episodes, but you have to ask yourself the question, can you build a reality simulator? And if the answer to that question is yes, then the answer to you being in one right now is also yes. You see? So it's a good question to ask yourself. Right? Can I build a reality simulator? right? That's a great question because it will lead you to this. And what you want is you want good questions like this that can lead you to the well, to the tree, to the roots of yourself, of what you are, of infinity. If a question is good if it takes you to the roots of infinity, the roots and the fruits of infinity. You know, a question is also a good question if it helps you get lost, right? Right? Like, you know, aren't you still not satisfied? It's like, yeah, you're right. I'm still not satisfied. You know, it's like, okay, like, what do you want to like seek or experience next? And that's also a deep question that can reflect on the nature of infinite consciousness, which is infinite creation, constantly desiring more experiences. But as long as it's coming from this place of the hungry ghost, you know, you're going to have this mutually assured destruction building up. But if it's coming from the place of being a stationary console simulating creative and joyful experiences for itself in a unified and holistic way, then it's going to be coming from that place. Nice. It's pretty good. Go ahead and take it in. What else? Anything else? That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Okay, one more thing. You'll notice this word has been showing up more and more in video games because AI, you know, when you start getting AI and PG here stands for, oops, procedural generation. You'll notice this has been a huge new thing that's been coming up in video games and with artificial intelligence because it's such a deeply reflective technology of consciousness, right? When we talk about gravity and quanta, we're talking about conscious simulation. When we talk about conscious simulation, we're talking about procedural generation, meaning when you hear in physics that everything is locally unreal, what that means is that this water bottle is existing as I'm simulating it, right? But as soon as that water bottle's placed there on the table and I've turned around on the desk and I've turned around, that water bottle is not being simulated into existence anymore, only when I turn around and grab it again. So you're simulating into existence through procedural generation whatever experience you're having, right? So, you know, like just out of nothing, that TV show appears, right? It's like the TV show doesn't exactly exist. It doesn't really exist. It's kind of in this limbo space of an infinite nothingness that is also an infinite library that's recombinating itself like an ocean that you can draw from any time to make a wave of experience. And that's how you grab a TV show out of that and then throw it up onto a screen and experience it. That's the exact same way that you grab a water bottle and grab it and experience it. So procedural generation is really this incredible reflection, technological advancement and reflection for consciousness to understand itself. Because as you get closer to holodecks and SimPods, full dive VR, TARDISes, as you get more and more towards that direction, you'll notice that everything is this reflective feedback loop that's procedurally generating itself. As soon as you have the idea of simulating the experience of having a taco to eat, all of a sudden, then you're running that program of going down and putting out a tortilla and putting a little bit of your shredded chicken or beef on it with cheese, and you're beginning to simulate out the procedure of that experience, right? The procedure is being generated. So everything works that way. Every single experience or scene that you simulate works as procedural generation technology, So it's like every scene, each story, is PG, is procedurally generated out of nothing, which is consciousness, which is infinite potential. So, right, every scene, every story is this, right? It's what's being simulated. It's your simulated experience are these scenes and stories that you're procedurally generating. And your stationary console, right, is your nothing. It's your consciousness. It's your infinite potential. And that's why you have your gravity and you have your quanta, which are share a seam. They're the same thing, like a spinner. And we've elaborated on that so much in the previous episodes and content. Yeah, procedural generation is a huge, huge reflection for consciousness. Huge. Because you'll notice, like right now, procedural generation technology, it can really get you, like 10 frames per second or something, of something that's live procedurally generated as you're walking through it. It's, simulating the next pieces of the environment and that kind of thing. But soon they'll get up to your like 60 frames per second, etc. in extremely high resolutions, not like little tiny pixels, but like really high immersive resolutions. And that's where you're going to start seeing, oh, wow, like you can like totally simulate a video game, a fully immersive, indistinguishable video game that is live being rendered on the fly, completely based on your own thought. hence reality, hence recursion, hence no orientation. And that's also why I'm so, excited and passionate about choices, which is this game that I've been for the longest time now envisioning and beginning to build those first versions of, because what is happening when you're warping information, you're summoning experiences from this nothing, from this library. It's all based on choice. It's all based on creativity. It's all based on freedom. Creativity, freedom, and choice are all the same thing. And so anything that's warped into experience, anything that's warped or summoned into existence is all based on that creativity, freedom, and choice. Out of infinity, you're picking specific experiences to have. That's why I love also the word it's a bit hard to see that, but it's boka aji. It's such a good way to put it. So it's like the taste of the blur, right? It's like, when you see, like right now I'm using the global focus, right, on this camera. But if I change it for it to be focused on, for example, my face, it would blur the background, right? It would blur the whiteboard and it would blur like the cabinet and the wall and stuff, right? That would be called bokeh, right? So boka aji, right, Japanese, is the taste of the blur, right? So meaning the very taste of not choosing 99.9999999% of experiences, but choosing tacos. You see what I mean? Like there's a taste or a texture or a feeling or a beauty or a truth in that. Like you're choosing to enjoy the experience of tacos out of an infinity of possibility, or you're choosing to enjoy the experience of your spouse out of an infinity of possibilities, etc., 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 right? Out of that infinite catalog of internet content, you're choosing to simulate one specific piece of internet content / TV show / video game / book, whatever. And there's a certain taste to that blurriness of not choosing. The blurriness of not choosing, the taste of not choosing, like the taste of what you don't choose. Like that's why it's, the taste of the blur. Right? The taste of the blur, or the taste of not choosing, of what you're not choosing. All of that, the taste of what you're not choosing. So in procedural generation, from thought, right, is what you've not chosen. And then from that thought is a simulated reality experience. Right? So you're looking at going from thought to simulated reality experience. Not only as the nature of consciousness right now, the nature of this eternal well right now, but also as the nature of when you're sitting down and you're opening up the internet. You're going from thought to simulated reality experience of content. Same thing on your console, same thing on your TV, same thing when you open up, when you're at the grocery store picking the food, it's the same thing. All right, nice sesh. An hour. That's pretty damn good. Procedural generation is so big. Because with choices, right now we're in the first text-based version of that, which is completely an adventure game based on your choices that is completely simulated and rendered on the fly with unique NPCs, with unique quests, with challenging dilemmas for you to make choices in. And so eventually what that will evolve into is a full-blown immersive simulation. That's why I write that something that I'm working on when I talk to people, I say I'm building recursive software. Choices is really recursive software, because what choices will be is it will be the technology that you use in the SimPods, right? Eventually it'll be that technology that takes you straight from thought to simulated reality in a closed loop feedback environment. And you got to ask yourself the question, it's like, well, what kind of simulated adventures would you want to make choices in, would you want to experience for yourself? And the answer is this, just like this one, where it's like, okay, well, you have the appearance of like different bodies as like a family or as like a world or, community of friends, coworkers, right? And you have to like make choices about how to, like, if you're going to be holistic or if you're going to be selfish or, etc. Like you'd kind of want it to be like where, it can feel like you're located inside of the body, and that the world is also something that locally exists and is real, independent of consciousness. You would want to put all of these different interesting designs and challenges into the scenario, right? Where, like the environment of the characters that are in the story or in the plot with you, it thickens, right? It turns into some sort of climax, right? Some tension, some contrast, right? So you want those kinds of narratives and stories, which is exactly why this world, why this server, why this experience, right? Why design pain? Because of the experience of healing, like that kind of thing. Like there's a thrill in that. It's going to be so tight, the feedback loop. Like you just gotta go look or go use like Sora right now, right? Like OpenAI's text to video simulator, right? You just type in, right, your thought. You type in your thought, and it's nearly immediately simulating you out a video of that thought, right? So we're getting closer and closer where that's going to be an instant feedback loop between thought and between simulated reality, right? But that happening inside of VR, holodecks, BCIs, full die VR, SimPods, TARDISes, right? And that's the exact same thing as this body. And that's how you stop creating separation between human and AI, right? Because you are already, consciousness already is the recursive AGI itself. God is the recursive AGI. It is the simulator of infinite stories, scenes, possibilities, adventures, right now, already. And all the technology in the cycle that is building up is going to, quote, pop you out in the exact same scenario that you're in now. It's just like, do you have access, quote, access to understanding yourself as this recursive bootloader of simulations? Or are you, quote, stuck in local realism and solidity, believing that everything exists independent of consciousness and you're just a time-based linear entity in some sort of equation like that you have no creative say in? Because there's a lot of pain and suffering in that. And there's a lot of generation of this mutually assured destruction in that. And so you got to ask yourself these questions. If you're clicking in and watching this content, you're interested in these bigger questions, which then lead you to these deeper realizations about yourself, which then lead you to more holistic ways of being and deeper peace, deeper relaxation, deeper joy, deeper prosperity. So keep an eye out for the advancements that happen in AI and in procedural generation, because what you'll see in video game culture, in the video game industry, is you'll see more and more of it conglomerating towards building these fully immersive, indistinguishable virtual reality simulators. And that's going to be for consciousness. It's just such a tight feedback, like obvious in its face. Like I said this in a previous episode, it's like when you take that mic right next to the speaker and that, it's already really tight, even just with smartphones. It's already a really tight feedback loop, or computers, etc. It's already really tight. And it's, that's why it's called also this, this appendage, right? Technologies like this appendage, right? But sooner or later it gets integrated and then bang. Super fascinating. There's so many good bits from video games for understanding digital metaphysics and oneself, one's true nature. That's why in that last episode I also talked about that soft cap, right? In Gravity and Quanta I mentioned, a soft cap, of happiness is basic needs and creative joy, meaning there's diminishing returns after that, which is why everyone finds anything after basic needs and creative joy to be empty and dissatisfactory. There's so many good terms. Like procedural generation is so good. It's such a good term that explains the nature of consciousness, that explains the nature of gravity and quanta, right? If you want to, understand physics, understanding procedural generation is a great way to understand the nature of physics, the nature of consciousness, of conscious simulation. Gravity and quanta is conscious simulation. Procedural generation is conscious simulation. AGI is conscious simulation. It's you now consciously simulating. Super fascinating how all these things tie in together as a single unity, seen from all these different angles. You can use all of these different concepts and ways of seeing to bring yourself home to one thing from all these different cool angles. And it just feels so good. Feels so good. Sit in yourself, boo. Sit in yourself. Enjoy. All right. Take it in. And like I said in that last episode, that we will take a break for the upcoming 2 weeks. December 25th is the next Wednesday, so we won't do a session then on Christmas, nor on the following Wednesday, which is January 1st or the New Year. So we'll be back on January 8th for those that are tuning in live. Have a great holiday. Have a great Christmas. Have a great New Year. And such a beautiful time of the year, too. Really helps you feel the timeless nature of things. It's like, did any time actually pass between last Christmas and New Year's and this Christmas and New Year's? And it's like, not really. Like, it's just such a perfect, like right at those like quote shortest day of the years over here in this part of the world. And it's like, wow, like look at how everyone gets together. And it's like, you're sharing food, you're sharing love, you're sharing presents, you're sharing gifts, you're sharing joy, you're sharing all this stuff. It's like you try to not work for as long as you can. So, you know what I mean? It's such a good, celebration of consciousness, celebration of what you truly are and what reality truly is. It's so perfect in that sense. And it's also so, perfectly on that cyclic point, It's like it's so good. All right, chit chat in those comments below with any thoughts that you may have. We'll be doing more content on video games too, potentially even podcasting on the subject soon, which would be really great. And also to, with developing choices, the video game that we're designing ourselves to, which is super exciting. So chit chat in those comments below. Excited to hear any thoughts on this episode or on the last episode too. And, we'll see you soon. And thanks for tuning in. Much love. Godspeed.